My name is Nicole Sawyer, and I was in foster care. I was in foster care 5 times in 3 different states. I was raised by a schizophrenic, bipolar mother that's unmedicated, that is also an immigrant from Lithuania. My father is an American. He was born and raised in Miami. He's an alcoholic and drug addict. And this is just how my life unveiled. I want to take the time and be as vulnerable as I can so I can give the strength for other foster youth to be able to do the same so we can expose a corrupt system and not allow it to keep happening generationally. What I'm about to say is true, and I'm not saying this in order to receive any type of attention. All the attention that I want is for people to understand what life is like in the system. I was in foster care in 3 different states, first time being placed in New Jersey where I was born in Hillsborough. Only 4 days old, where I was removed because they found a bottle of alcohol in the apartment because my father is an alcoholic and he decided to show up drunk in the delivery room. And so that was my first greeting with the system, where I was actually about to be adopted out. I didn't find out till I was 19. And so that resulted in my mother using the fact that she's an immigrant to have us travel all the way to Lithuania. But this process took some time because the judge for my case did not believe that Lithuania was a habitable country for youth, so they had to work with the Lithuanian consulate to prove that a child can be raised there. 1.5, 2, I was brought to Lithuania where everything seemed normal. But moving around from place to place, my mom not keeping a steady job, and then me always living with my favorite aunt. She's an amazing woman. Her name is Marina. Well, Maria, but everyone calls her Marina. And the amount of love she has, it's crazy because everyone her whole life has said her name wrong, but she's allowed people to do so, and she still loves them no matter what. Then at about 6.5, my mother decided to bring me back to America, where I lived in Florida. And she wanted me to meet my father's side of the family. I started Benoist Farms, and school was great, but they wouldn't put me in first grade, even though I was 6.5. They put me in kindergarten, so I was in ESL because Lithuanian and Russian were my first languages. So within time, a few months went by, and I was supposed to go with my mother to go to a hockey game. But before then, we decided to stop at Walmart, and a man started following us. My mom grabbed a hold of my hand and held it tight, and I didn't understand what was happening. All I knew was that she didn't like it and she was trying to leave. And once we got to the parking lot, the gentleman said that she either has to let me go or she will be arrested. So my mother told me to go with this man, and I did not understand what is happening at 6.5. I'm just going with some random man from Walmart that was following us. Where he then brought me into a big building and bought me a sandwich out of a vending machine. And I remember I had Cheez-Its for the first time because my mother, she wouldn't buy me snacks. That night I was brought to this house with beds, and I didn't understand. They just said, you can choose your bedding, and I remember there was a strawberry shortcake one and an Eeyore one. I chose the Eeyore one. I spent a few days there, and then one day they told me this man and woman named Charlie and Lori, they're gonna come and pick me up. I didn't know what that meant. So being so young, just being tossed in those homes, it made no sense. I'm just thinking this is happening for something, but it was never explained why. So I stayed with the couple for a few months, where then my father's sister decided to take care of me instead. And that living situation wasn't so great because they threw Christianity onto me. And if I didn't go to church on Wednesdays, I'd be grounded. It was a nice family setting where I got to see the dynamic of siblings, mother and father, and other, but the forced religion viewpoint I don't feel is fair to put on to a child that young. I started to have visits with my mother. She started to come from the train, and we would pick her up and she would take me to a pizza place and we would get this big antipasta salad, and that was my visit for the week. I didn't know what was happening. My mom said, "Mommy's gonna have you home soon." All I knew that meant was I'm not gonna be living there any longer, so what's next to come? She decided to then start living with a man named Jerry in this little room where she only used a microwave. And one day, my aunt and uncle said I can go live with my mom. So I started living with my mom, and I'm now 7 years old, and I started a new school, Lincoln Elementary. I was in first grade now, and I was in Miss Payne's class. I lived with my mom in that room, one little room, for about a year. And then the next summer, my mom sent me to see my father. And I don't see my father much. My mom didn't give me much of reason what and why, but my mom said that it's not good to have him around. So within that time, my father had me that whole summer, and then when I came back, we started living in Mallard's Cove. It was a nice apartment my mom had gotten, because during that time my mom had gotten a job at an electric in engineering or job, I believe, or a signal job. It's something in Florida. We started also always going to this one place where my mom would get medicine. That time period in Mallard's Cove, when I started, was second grade, and that was the most stable till fourth grade. When that winter, we decided to go to Lithuania to visit for the first time in 10 years. My mom was acting funny for a while now, and I didn't know nothing of it because everything's normal. We got to Lithuania, my mom started having fights with my uncles because she wanted to take my grandma, that was 82, to America for the first time when she doesn't know English or nothing, and they were having issues with that. That led to them finally kicking my mom out, which meant I was leaving too. But that stay in Lithuania was supposed to be for 2 weeks, but it lasted for 2 months. During that 2 months, my mom, she was writing fake checks in the capital city, which led us to then having to flee the country and go to Latvia and go to the American embassy and request emergency flight tickets so I could be brought back to America. We returned back on my birthday, February 26, 2011, where then we came back to Mallard's Cove, and I realized my mom had lied that she still had her job, and that's why she was beating me so much and why she was acting funny. She had stopped her medicine, and with us being evicted, my mom, she wanted me to still finish fifth grade in Florida. So we ended up moving from motel to motel, going from place to place, living with cockroaches, places where men were looking at me. And this is at a time period where I'm only 12 years old, so I don't understand. And my mom, she had raised me that she instilled such fear in a way that it was almost like she institutionalized me in her own way. She kept me on a tight leash for so long that I don't think that it was healthy. And it led to more chaos down the line. After I finished fifth grade, my mom decided to come to New York, where we then came to Glens Falls. I was living in the woods for about a week, and during that week, I remember I was eating the flavorings of the ramen packets and the noodles, but it was like raw, without water or hot water. So then one day my mom got in a car accident with the car while we were driving around, which led us to then be even more homeless than we already were. We decided to ask for help, and how she did this was lie and say that at that time period we were coming from a domestic violent issue. So then we were placed in a domestic violence shelter. My mom having another episode led us to be removed from there. And that brought us to then DSS. I was then introduced to the Gateway Motel in Saratoga, where we were living with many different families and a lot of drug addicts. And at this point, I am getting older, so I do understand what is happening a little bit, but not fully, because I'm still brainwashed by what type of perspective my mom has put into my head. After we had gotten kicked out of 3 motels, because at DSS they do a 3 strikes you're out policy, that led us to sleeping at a Stewart's one night in downtown Saratoga. I was at a picnic table and I was crying because I was upset, and the police had stopped, which they had then told my mother that they will allow her to sleep at the station with me, and they will help us find sheltering. The next night we returned and we went to sleep, where then I was woken up at 3 a.m. to a scream of my mother, which I knew meant that I was going to be removed for the 3rd time. I didn't know where I was going to go or what was happening. All I knew is that just another rendezvous. I was placed in a foster home with a woman named Ella. She was very nice, but I only stayed there for 1 day, where then they placed me in the care of my father. Even though he has no stable shelter, he's an alcoholic and he has no income. So the logic there is not, I don't see it, but that's New York State. So after 2 weeks, they had reunified me with my mother, where then I was brought to Ten Brooks Women's Shelter. And that's in Albany, downtown. I believe it's actually going to be shut down soon. And I started KIP. I went to KIP for a couple of weeks, and then my mom, having her continual episodes, made us get kicked out of the shelter once again, and she stopped taking me to school. Once I stopped going to school, that meant that CPS was again going to be brought back into the picture. Being so young and naive, those years I overlooked as very normal, with my mom beating me, my mom putting me down, and everything happening around me. she justified it, and I thought that it was just okay. Like, this is how things are supposed to be. That I was the one that was doing everything wrong. I didn't realize till I was 13 that my mom is abusive and she's a manipulator. And so when I was removed once again for the fourth time, I was in foster care with a family for 8 months, which were very deceiving at the time. I thought was my first mother, but down the line, true colors reveal. I then decided to go back to live with my mother due to the fact that my mother told me that if I did not, she would kill herself. And at 13, I didn't understand that. I thought that, again, I'm the bad child. I then realized, returning back to her, that with clarity of knowing it's now abuse, that this is not okay. She decided to move out of Albany and move to Westerlo while I still went to Albany schools. And that meant more space for her to have more room for less people to hear me from getting beat, and less help for me to receive if I'm seeking and screaming. On March 26th, 2014, me and my mom, we were coming back from Planet Fitness because my mom was taking me to Planet Fitness because I was fat. And we were fighting in the car, and my mom decided to turn the wheel, so we got in a car accident. I remember us spinning and turning, and the first thing, after everything happened, I started screaming to get air. And I look at her on my left, and I just see her eyes closed and her just lifeless. I didn't know if she was dead, what was happening. I couldn't see if she was breathing. I said, "Mama, Mama, are you okay?" She said, "You don't care about me." That's the first thing she said. I thought I dislocated my shoulders because I could not move. When rescue came, they actually cut my hoodie, which at that moment was very significant because that was from the foster family I had just left, which that was my mother at that moment that I had viewed. My actual representation of a mother. So when I got to the hospital, I told them finally, I said, I don't want to go back to her. I don't want to live with her no more, with my biological mom. Please help me. They didn't let me leave the hospital. But the next day, Tim, he came to the hospital, and with her standing in the room, he was evaluating, and he said that I was fine and I was safe to go. So then I went back to my house, where then I became where then I became even more depressed than I already was. And I already started self-harming at that point, and I felt like at a younger age, because I did continue it down the line, at a younger age it was more of a scream for help, which led to turning into a different way to cope with things. And my mother, she didn't let me go to school when I broke my collarbone because she said I was too sick. And with me being too sick meant that I just had to sit there. but she was not home. And she disconnected all the internets and the phone so I could not call or reach out to nobody. And we had barely any food. All I had was my dog Audrey that she had just gotten me. I hadn't seen her then at that point for 3 days, where then I'm greeted with a knock. And it's the police. The police are looking for her because she stole the loaner car from DePaula. And I told them, I said, I don't know where she is. She said we were gonna go to Florida again. I don't know. My mom then didn't come up, nothing. So I went back into foster care that night. And that was the 5th time I went into foster care and the final time. When they put out a missing persons report on the news, my teachers finally reached out to come to find out that every apprehension they've ever had was true. And that's one thing I never understood. All these people around me saw that she was acting funny, but they never did anything but just watch. And we can all be bystanders, but then the problem's gonna just continue. In order to stop something, we have to take action. When I went back into foster care, I went back into the same foster home that I was in when I had been placed at the 4th time. This time, the mother is what I'm going to be referring her to, even though she's not a mom anymore. She got divorced, and then she told them that if I could not be adopted out by October, she doesn't want me. So it was basically like a limitation of time towards the love she had and the willingness she was going to give because she had to move to Florida. I was then introduced to a woman named Amy in Saratoga, and it didn't work out. She was manipulating me too, telling me how the last foster family didn't love me. They didn't want me. And then I was introduced to Jen and Mike. Jen and Mike I stayed with for 1.5 years, but there was a lot of problems down the line. They were a family that liked to make innuendos, but once I started to do so with them, they told my caseworker that I'm being overly sexual and inappropriate with them, that it's making them uncomfortable, and that I'm a high risk. But their son that was younger was allowed to call me sexy. When a year had gone by, they had brought in 2 more foster boys. And those 2 boys, they were good, they were great. We were cool. I had nothing against them. But what I did have against them is the fact that once I told them that I saw them as an aunt and an uncle more than a mom and a dad, they had an issue that that's not enough love for them. So they started to act bitter towards me, which led me to attempt suicide for the 2nd time, and I was placed into Ellis on June 22nd, 2016. When I was in Ellis, my caseworker came in and told me that Jen and Mike no longer want me, and the only option is to go to Queensbury, which I refused because I did not know anyone out there and I'm tired of moving. Because of this, they put me into St. Anne's. Now, I have nothing against St. Anne's, and I understand we come from bad troubles and things, but putting somebody that is suicidal with girls that are on pins, on like they're fighting doing drugs, just because I had been so sad is not okay. I stayed there for 3 months, where then I was put into another group home. Once I was in that group home, I started smoking weed. I started doing whatever because I didn't care. Because this is my first time that, why does it matter? Once I left the group home, I started living with another foster family, which is number 8 now. And she had a daughter. Her daughter got the sun and the moon. I got the scraps. She did stuff for me. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say she was shit. I can't, that'd be wrong. But the half-assed love you showed compared to your own daughter, that's not okay. It's really not. If you make the commitment to take in a traumatized youth, to promise them the love that they never received, what type of sense does it make to then slap them in the face with nothing? Just ignorance. They told me that I was ungrateful and that I don't deserve a family. I then chose to leave, which led me back at the group home, doing whatever. I finally was able to be brought into an independent living program, where then I truly started acting out. Due to the fact that I didn't have money nor much food, I chose to go on sugar daddy sites, which I would do PPM, which is basically pay per meet, and I would perform oral sex for $500 to just get some type of money. For me to have to do that while I'm a ward of the state, while you are getting paid thousands of dollars, but yet I'm walking with holes in my shoes, make that make sense. While in the independent living program, I had met my first boyfriend. Knowing that he had much trauma, like me, I chose to take it on, but not knowing that it would mean that I would be abused and cheated on and lied to. I allowed this domestic violent relationship to carry on for 9 months. Mind you, the program was witnessing everything at the same time, all the beatings, all the breakings. It didn't matter. But once I turned 21, they put me in a homeless shelter and I was done. Just a statistic.